Shadow people are silhouettes of humans and non-human forms that are seen mostly at night and are the most common form of nighttime visitation. Sightings of the so-called shadow people have been with us for centuries, but it is only in the past 10 years that reports seem to be increasing. Shadow people are not hindered by walls, but on occasion they seem to maneuver to avoid physical objects. There have been many shadow forms reported, some big, some small, while others wear a hood or a hat. Shadow people can appear surrounded by a black mist or a vapor and have been reported to move in a crouching position as if stalking prey. There are quite a number of reports where shadow people have appeared at the foot of a person's bed, usually between 2 and 4 in the morning, just standing there or pointing at the person. Most of the time there is no communication, and the facial features are dark and distorted. But on occasion, glowing red eyes have been seen. A shadow being's makeup seems to be dense, since the beam from a flashlight is absorbed into their bodies. But if something is thrown at them, they seem to flinch, even though the object passes right through them. Just before the appearance of a shadow person, the experiencer wakes up in the middle of the night with a feeling of stark terror. As they glance into the darkened room, a shadowy human figure floats through the doorway and positions himself at the foot of the bed. The apparition stays there for a while, causing terror in the witnesses. Then either disappears or floats out of the room, usually leaving through the ceiling or under the bed. Also, sometimes before these entities are seen, the person will have a bad feeling, as if something is not right during the day. As they go to sleep, they have terrible nightmares and are awakened by the bed vibrating or even bouncing up and down on the floor. The shadow person will then float into the room or materialize out of nowhere. In many cases, the experience will repeat several times a month. It seems to me that these shadow beings or people are actually an intelligence located in a parallel universe or dimension. As they press up against the membrane that separates the two realities, we perceive them as a shadow image. No one really knows the true motives behind these visitations, but many victims feel as though they are being spied on. It is my opinion that these shadow people are actually Jinn trying to cross the barrier from their world into ours. We should pay very close attention to all these reports. In December 1981, at about 8 in the evening, Frank was watching television alone at home. His wife was out of town, when suddenly the power went out. He got a flashlight, looked out the window, and noticed that the power was still on in the neighborhood. He then went down into the basement to check the circuit breakers when his phone started ringing in short, loud bursts. Frank claims that it didn't sound like his phone. He picked up the receiver where there were two voices, one of a man and the other of a woman, but they didn't sound human. He described it as sounding computer-generated. The voices took turns speaking and said they chose him to communicate with, and that they had cut his power, but meant him no harm. Frank claims he tried talking back to them, but they were some kind of pre-recorded message and wouldn't respond to any of his questions. He was told to wait by his TV set for the power to return. The voices were very polite, he said, and would often use the word please when they wanted him to do something. As the power returned, the television turned on all by itself. On its screen was the fuzzy image of a person. They had large eyes that wrapped around its pear-shaped head. The being communicated telepathically with Frank and said that he was genetically programmed to receive these contact experiences. Frank expressed reluctance, to which the being replied,
"You have no choice in the matter."
Fearful, Frank went and pulled the plug from the wall. The power remained on, and he stood back and watched in horror as the being mocked him. Frank then picked up a glass ashtray and heaved it into the TV screen, causing it to explode into a shower of glass. Afterwards, he drank some alcohol he had stashed and convinced himself that it was a hallucination or a bad dream. He cleaned up the glass and decided to go to bed and try to forget about what had taken place. Frank went to bed, and for some reason he was very tired and drained. He slept until the wee hours of the morning and woke up in a cold sweat with a feeling of terror. Here, his story continues. When I woke up, it was about 2 in the morning, and the room had a heavy-like atmosphere to it. I felt incredible fear, as if something awful was in the room with me. I can only describe it as a presence of pure evil somewhere in the dark, waiting to pounce on me. I sat up, and the bed began to vibrate. A shadowy mist came out from under the bed and hovered at the foot. Although the room was dark, it was partially illuminated by a nightlight, but this cloud was jet black. The mist formed into a human-like shape. It was very tall and seemed to have a hood. It looked like the angel of death, but the first thing that came to my mind was that it was there for me because I was dead or about to die. I could not see any facial features, but this image had long arms with no hands. It stood at the foot of the bed and pointed its arm at me, and as it did, I yelled at it, asking why it was here. Then it formed into a black cloud and went through the ceiling. I turned on the light and noticed a slight smell of cigar smoke in the room. The feeling of fear was still with me. I stayed up all night with the lights on until sunrise. My wife returned about noon the next day and asked what happened to the television set. I told her everything that had taken place. She didn't say a word, but just looked at me with a concerned stare of disbelief. I didn't know it at the time, but what Frank described was an encounter with a shadow person. Shadow people seem to be some type of dimensional entity that exists in a reality very close to our own. They also seem connected to UFO contact abductions and cases of demonic possession. Paranormal researcher Rosemary Ellen Gully has done extensive research on the shadow people and has compiled hundreds of case studies. Her initial findings indicate that encounters with this type of entity are increasing and are global in nature.